It's John Lordan from Three Men and a Mystery, and we just want to let you know before today's episode that we had another episode we were intending on releasing with interview segments with Jackie Burgoon Herring, who is J.B. Beasley's sister. Now, Jackie reached out to us, and she is very concerned about the status of the case at this point, so we're going to hold off on that episode, and we're going to get to an episode that I think is really, really important. There was a court date that happened with Coley McCraney last week, and we heard in that some of the people that are working on this case aren't even familiar with the fact that they tried to charge someone with these murders way back in 1999, and his name was Johnny Barrentine. So we are going into Johnny Barrentine's story right here, right now. Welcome back to Three Men and a Mystery. I'm one of the three men, John Lordan.
And I'm Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
On today's episode, we're going to take a look at someone that was considered the number one suspect in this case very early on. His name is Johnny Barrentine. Johnny William Barrentine was 28 years old on July 31st, 1999. Described as a quiet man by his family, Johnny was married to a woman named Mary, and together they had a 2-year-old son named Alan. He worked as a part-time mechanic at a nearby auto shop called Daniel's Auto Repair, and possibly had another job loading and unloading boxes. He would eventually be arrested and named the prime suspect in the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracie Hawlett. Gray, can you give us some info on where Johnny lived? And that's obviously a big part of why he was considered for this.
Yeah, he lives incredibly close to the Big Little convenience store and the location where the car was found. He lived less than a quarter mile east of the Big Little convenience store and 3/8 of a mile as the crow flies from Herring Avenue where JB's car was found.
Okay, and in terms of where he worked, does that relate to these scenes at all?
Well, he actually, if he was going to drive to work from his house, he would drive right through town, through that crazy intersection with the signs that we've discussed
on
previously.
Broad Street, right?
Right, exactly. And then he would take East Andrews Avenue all the way, and it becomes 249. That crosses over 231, and I think that's the location that they were given directions to at the Big Little convenience store. They just got confused at the intersection and took a left and were on 123. So Johnny Barrentine would have driven across that exact same intersection and then another 2 or 3 miles to get to his workplace at Daniel's Auto Repair.
We know that he was home, and apparently he went to the Big Little to buy some milk that night. But I'm just curious about the layout of this because, we were talking before we started recording today, and Morph brought up a big point about the car being dropped off there and the likelihood that the crime being committed happened somewhere else, and the person that committed it might be afraid of the fact that police actually discover the true location of where it happened. There must have been something kind of risky about that because they decided to drive a car with 2 bodies in the trunk over to Herring and drop it off there. But there was other theories about that too. Morph, you want to talk about that real quick? Just a little recap of what we were talking about before we started rolling here today.
Yeah, we were thinking about why someone would put themselves at risk driving with the bodies in the trunk. And I think there's a couple possibilities. One, that wherever they encountered Tracie and JB, they may have had a car there and did the killings and then came back and dumped it where they met him. If they met him on Herring some way, took them, shot them, brought them back, and then left the car and drove off in their own car. But we were also looking at it from the reverse. If somehow they encountered them in another area and they brought the car back to Herring, how would they have left Herring to get back to the other area where their car was?
It kind of brings in the possibility that maybe there was more than one person.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And it really does boil down to a matter of, were they trying to get away from something, or were they trying to get back to something that was over at Herring? It's kind of a brain twist there. But Morph, we had you dig up some comments on Johnny. You want to share those with us?
Yeah, everybody that knew Johnny, a lot of his relatives were very supportive of the fact that they didn't think he did this. His mother, Faye Barrentine, said he did not do it. He's not capable of doing it. And Johnny's boss, who seemed to know him pretty well from working with him, said, I don't think there's anybody here that believes he did it. We never had any problems with him. If all this gets resolved, he'd still be welcome back. And that was, of course, Alan Daniels, his employer. So to say that after all this, he'd still bring him back, I think that's pretty telling. And then Alan also pointed out that Johnny sometimes tended to stretch the truth a little bit, but he always found Johnny likable and didn't notice any issues with his temper at all.
Yeah, and, we've kind of bumped into that. I know I have in cases I've looked into. Sometimes you just have these personalities that, people like to tell stories, like to tell tall tales a little bit. And Alan is certainly pointing out that Johnny did seem to do that on occasion. So does that come into play with the information that we're going to share with you guys today? Possibly. But Johnny also spoke up for himself at one point.
In court, Johnny said, I had nothing to do with those two girls. I am sitting in jail for no reason. I didn't see anything. I made up everything to get the reward money. I was tricked into saying things that weren't true. We'll be back to dive into the story of Johnny Barrentine right after this break.
Sometimes in this line of work, investigating just sucks up all of our time and literally eats up our day. And by the time we get to dinner, we're not always doing the best in terms of making good choices. Well, thankfully, there's a company named HelloFresh that can help with that. HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans, and delivers step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so you can just cook, eat, and enjoy. And HelloFresh was kind enough to send us all samples. We've all gotten to try it and do our own recipes. Morph, what do you think of HelloFresh?
I thought it was great. My wife and I got to spend more time with the kids instead of grocery shopping and meal planning. And I tried the cheddar chicken fajitas, and they were excellent.
Gray?
Well, I'm not really great in the kitchen at all, to be honest with you. And what was amazing for me is that they provided these 6 easy steps to follow on these cards and a picture of what the food should look like at the end. So when I created the meal, I actually did it myself. It's one of the few times where I actually cook a meal. A lot of times I'm putting stuff in the microwave, all right? So I made the meals on my own, and they tasted absolutely incredible. Something that you could buy at a restaurant.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a really good experience with it too. They have 3 different plans that you can choose from: a classic plan, a veggie plan, which was great because I'm a vegetarian and the food was really, really good, as well as a family plan. And you can switch those up at any point. You can also tell them how many meals you want per week, how many people you're feeding with those meals. It is really customizable. They can help make your week considerably easier. So please check it out. They also helped me push out of what I consider to be a recipe rut, where there's a few things that I'm pretty comfortable doing, but they pushed me outside of my comfort zone. I made a risotto, and I'm totally impressed by that because I watch cooking shows and I see people screw up risottos all the time. It was so easy with HelloFresh. I just followed the 6 steps, and pretty soon I was enjoying great, great food. You can try it yourself and get $80 off of your first month of HelloFresh. Just go to HelloFresh.com/3men. That's with the number 3. And use promo code 3men. Once again, with the number 3. You'll get $20 off of your first 4 boxes. That's like receiving 8 meals for free. So give them a try. Head over to HelloFresh.com and remember to use that promo code 3men. Welcome back, and please keep in mind that our sponsors are helping us raise funds that will go towards investigating this case further, so please show them the same support they're showing us. Now let's get into the story of Johnny Barrentine. I spoke to one of Johnny's sisters, and she confirmed that he did indeed have a mental disability. Sources say that he didn't complete the 8th grade, and he was in special education courses. By all accounts that I can find from people in his personal life, he was known as a gentle and hardworking man who was occasionally known to tell tall tales. The Barrentine family lived close to the Big Little convenience store, and according to Mary, Johnny left home around 11:30 that night, heading there to pick up some milk. He was gone for at least 90 minutes. Mary said when he returned, he was noticeably upset and told her that he had been hit by a black truck with a Dothan tag near Herring Avenue. According to Johnny Barrentine, he first went to Chief Spivey several days after the murder to tell him about a rumor. The chief told Johnny they'd already looked into that rumor and the person named was not a suspect. In the weeks following, news reports quoted law enforcement as saying they were getting close to identifying a suspect. Some of that information may have come in through the local Crime Stoppers tip line. This information has taken us in a very positive direction, Police Chief Tony Spivey was quoted as saying, but he would not comment on the specifics. Friends of Johnny Barrentine said he was also talking to them, saying that he knew who killed JB and Tracie, and one friend told him that he should go collect the reward money. Some accounts say that Johnny was also conducting his own investigation, going to the scene to search for clues and attempting to get security camera footage of that night. So the first question I have for you guys, do you think it's strange that Johnny's kind of investigating this case? It seems like he's talking to some people about the fact that he knows who did this. So is he looking for proof that his information's right? What do you guys think about this, Morph?
I think maybe it intrigued him enough to where he wanted to try and go out and see if he could figure it out. And maybe in his mind, he was thinking about that reward money, and maybe he thought he could help dig up some clues and somehow collect on that reward money.
What about it, Gray?
Yeah, I mean, if you believe the part about him wanting to collect the reward money, then maybe he was trying to investigate it to come up with the answer. The part that, to me, that's interesting is that his wife said that for 90 minutes he was gone at a store it's that close. So is that a factual piece of information that the wife put out there?
Right.
What do you think about that, John?
I'm reaching out to her. I'm trying to get in contact with her because I really want to try to get some better definition of that stuff. I have questions, not only that, but why is he going to a store that's closed? We know that the Big Little is closed at 11. So why is he going out at 11:30 to buy milk from there? But that whole story doesn't make a lot of sense. In terms of him being hit, I assume they're talking about his vehicle. Did she confirm that there was some type of damage that had happened to his vehicle? Did she see the spot where this truck supposedly hit him? There's a lot of questions, and I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that we might be able to get her to help us clarify some of that stuff.
And she even says that it was on Herring Avenue, right?
Yeah.
That she told him that night, right?
Yeah.
But see, that could just be maybe her thinking of that later after it was determined that the car was found on Herring Avenue.
Yeah, and this information's coming out through court trial stuff, so it's who knows how this information could be, I don't want to say contaminated, but you've got people that are talking about this for weeks on end and then going and presenting this stuff, and could it be that some of these specifics are getting mashed up with things that she heard after the fact? It's possible. I did also want to touch on a story I can't really confirm, but I'm seeing a lot of buzz around that he actually went to a video store to request the security camera footage, like a video rental store, to get the security camera footage from Big Little. Now, I can't find a solid source on that, and unless Mary tells us that she knows that for a fact, I don't know if we can really lean on it. But some people are saying, look, this just kind of points to the fact that we've got a guy that has pretty severe mental challenges here. And could he have really done this to these two girls? I don't know.
It's hard to find the actual video rental store because there aren't any anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Police say that Barrentine became a suspect after he gave them 6 differing versions of his actions that night in one 4.5-hour interview. Thankfully, we can get some detail about what he said and how law enforcement felt about it from an article written by Richard Lake for the Mobile Register. On September 1st, Barrentine met with police and told his story during a 4-hour videotaped interview. Barrentine, according to Spivey, said he had gone out for milk at 11:30, about the same time that JB and Tracie were on the telephone with Tracie's mom. At first, according to the chief, Barrentine said that on the night of the killings, he'd seen a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls were found. As the interview wore on, Barrentine changed his story several times, finally telling investigators that he'd picked up a man he didn't know, and the two drove by the Big Little store. Barrentine said the man he'd given a ride got into a car with two girls, who Barrentine identified as the dead girls, and told him to follow. He said they ended up on Herring Avenue. The man got the girls out of the car. Barrentine said he soon heard two gunshots and the man returned. Barrentine gave the man a ride away from the scene, then went home. So we've got it kind of encapsulated. Obviously, that's not 6 different versions of the story, but he did modify his story again to say that this wasn't a man that he didn't know, that this was a guy with tattoos, and by the way, that was actually his neighbor that had done this. What do you guys think about these stories and how they're changing so often? Do you think that police should be able to rely on this information? Gray, let's start with you. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think once you get somebody that's changing the story a lot like that, you sort of have to question what their motivation is in general. So I think at that point they should have become less sure that he was the suspect that they were looking for.
Right. And I don't think they're even counting the fact that this is not their first contact with him, that he went and talked to the chief before this interview, and he had a different rumor at that point. Now, I don't know if that rumor is the same as this information he's trying to present, where he's saying that it was this man he didn't know. No, it was this man with tattoos. No, it was actually his neighbor. Morph, what do you think? Can you give us any insight in why this story is changing so dramatically over the course of 4 hours?
It could be a number of different things. I wonder if maybe he's in one lie and he has to spiral into another one, change his story a little bit to keep going. But the part about picking up a total stranger, bringing him to shoot two girls, and giving the guy a ride out of there, it almost makes sense with what we think happened, or the movement of the girls. But some things definitely don't add up, though. And the key for me is the 90 minutes. If it's accurate that he was gone 90 minutes for something that should have been a couple minute round trip for him, we have to ask the question, where did he go during those 90 minutes, if that turns out to be accurate?
Yeah. And that's part of the tough spot here, and why I really hope that Mary will come through and help us get a better understanding of this, because the main version of that story that's been put out is actually the district attorney recounting Mary's story. So I don't know if we can trust it as much as getting it directly from the source. But yeah, very strange. Let's continue. More from the article published at the Mobile Register. Police arrested Barrentine then and there, charging him with 2 counts of capital murder. He says he was there, Police Chief Spivey said, explaining what made Barrentine a suspect. He relayed to us about getting the girls out of the car. One of the girls ran. The girls were combative. The individual placed the girls in the trunk. 2 shots were fired. The gunman comes back to the car. Something is in his hand. He drove the gunman outside the city. He returned home. Spivey said the district attorney, who was present during the interview, instructed police to arrest Barrentine. What do we do? The chief said in an interview this month. If you don't charge him, maybe you just let a killer walk out the door. You're between a rock and a hard place. And I think we have to keep in mind that this is only a month after the actual murders. So it really seems like things are moving very fast. And I don't know if this is good, solid movement. I don't know if it feels there's something very frantic about this to me. But what do you guys think about Spivey's statement there? Do you really think that they had enough to charge Johnny at this point, Morph?
Well, I think having the someone there to instruct them that he felt they had enough to arrest him, I think is important, because it's his job to make sure they can make a case against him stick. So he must have felt by the information that he had enough to make a case against him, which is why he instructed him to arrest Johnny.
Well, what's confusing about that, though, is they determined that the 2 girls weren't shot at that location, but Johnny's story is at that location, that them being shot in the trunk. So they should have immediately known that he wasn't telling the truth.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. How much of Johnny's story is really lining up with what they found and the evidence that they were able to gather? And of course, one of the biggest pieces of evidence hasn't even come into play yet, but we'll definitely get to that by the time we finish this. Other news reports would state that investigators believe that Barrentine acted alone and that him meeting JB and Tracie was purely a chance encounter. Chief Spivey told media that he didn't expect any other arrests for the murders. According to police, JB's car was found in the immediate area of Johnny Barrentine's home, which I think we can all agree with. Johnny's family and employer spoke up, saying that he wasn't capable of doing this and that they were critical that law enforcement wasn't revealing what evidence tied Johnny to the crime. I have to say, I think I'm a little frustrated by that too. Even in terms of him sharing information with them and the stories that they're saying that he told, we don't really have what I consider a confession at this point. Morph, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it would be interesting to know everything that was said and details of that to see what they got from him that may have lined up. And obviously some things seem like they didn't line up, but we don't have any access to what was talked about because we don't have any transcripts or anything that are available to us anyways. I
have little doubt in my mind, especially with how much Chief Spivey has been talking to the media throughout this case. I have very little doubt that if Johnny Barrentine sat in their room and said, I actually did this to these girls, I'm 100% certain that they would have shared that with the media and that would have come out. What we have here is them sharing details that are certainly suspicious. You have to wonder why this story is changing. Johnny keeps putting himself at the scene of the crime. Well, kind of, but to Gray's point, not really. He's putting himself at the scene of the drop point, but according to the police's information, that's not the same location where the crime was actually committed. It seems like there's a lot of incongruencies going on here, and how they could have thought that this was strong enough to run with. I'm kind of just wondering off the top, but to your point, we're not seeing the entire record here. And of course, there is a very big piece of information. There was no proof that Johnny ever even owned a gun. What do you think of that, Gray?
Well, if he didn't own a gun, I don't know how he would have gotten a gun. I mean, I guess he could have gotten a gun the same way a lot of criminals get one, but there's no evidence that he had one. So I don't know where they're coming up with, his story doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Like I'm saying, they've already determined that the crime scene was somewhere else and he said it was right there. And I just think the police are, grasping at straws at this point.
Kind of seems like it. And I don't know that it's without good reason. I've bumped into some information that, cases that go beyond 3 months, in particular homicide cases, their chances of getting solved decrease dramatically once it hits that 3-month mark. So here we are just 1 month in, and we've got them making a run at Johnny Barrentine and seeing if they can get this to stick. And I don't want to make it sound like I think that they're trying to pin it on someone that didn't do it. But I think that we do have to kind of consider the possibility that they're working so hard and rushing towards this as an answer that they might be missing some things that definitely in hindsight seem obvious, like, talking about the location, talking about the fact he doesn't have a gun, talking about the fact that this is a guy that has mental challenges, was known to kind of make stories bigger than they actually are. And they're kind of experiencing that in the interview room, but for some reason, no one's really considering that maybe that's all that's actually going on here. At a bond hearing, in a rare move, Johnny actually took the stand to speak for himself. His attorney said that Johnny wanted the judge to hear what he had to say and that he wanted to tell the truth. When talking about the police interview, Johnny claimed that eventually he would say anything the authorities wanted to hear if they would just let him go home. His lawyer, Bill Caminos, also spoke to the Mobile Register. As a lawyer, you need to take what your client says with a grain of salt sometimes, he said, speaking in slow, measured tones, his hands held together almost as if he were praying. But I had a feeling from the very beginning. In viewing the car, in viewing the evidence, I said to myself, no, Johnny Barrentine could not have done this. The police were under intense pressure to make an arrest, Caminos contended. And that pile of reward money kept growing. It grew enough to lure Barrentine in, Caminos said. Well, they started. They questioned and questioned and questioned. 4 hours, the lawyer said, punctuating each sentence with a moment of silence. It's all on video, and the questions turned from questions to accusations, from accusations to suggestions. Now, obviously, making a murderer, huge phenomenon that has exposed many of us to the possibility of false confessions. Am I the only one that's hearing parallels between Johnny Barrentine's story and Brendan Dassey's story, Gray?
I think it's very similar. Brandon Dassey was also, I don't know if you call it mentally challenged, but they just, in that case, they force-fed him the locations and different aspects of what they wanted him to say. He wasn't even thinking those things. And it sounds like they might have done the same thing with Johnny Barrentine here.
Yeah, and with something when it comes to like asking what the girls were wearing, like it would be more convincing to me if Spivey went to the newspaper and said, oh, by the way, Johnny Barrentine knew exactly what they were wearing. He mentioned specifically that there was some type of unique print on JB's shirt or something like that. But even in terms, if they were going to ask me about this case at this point, saying something like jeans, yeah, you've got a pretty high percentage of being right. You could say that in many, many cases and potentially be right. Morph, what do you think? Are we seeing parallels here to a false confession case like Brendan Dassey's?
Yeah, there's definitely some of that looks like it's going on as far as twisting words, maybe coasting a little bit towards one direction, leading him down a road towards a certain outcome. And that's why it would be tremendous if we somehow could see or hear what transpired. In Making a Murder, we get to hear a lot of Brendan Dassey's discussion, but we don't have any of that here that we can listen to or read in regards to Johnny's. So it would be good to have that if we could get access to that.
Yeah, and at least yet we don't have that. We are also working on potentially some angles there to get a much better understanding of what actually went down at these court dates.
Well, wouldn't there be a transcript of the actual interrogation somewhere?
I assume there is a transcript. Well, first of all, we know there's videotape, at least from what's being told in this article, and I'm sure that at some point someone has converted that to a written transcript. I think the main problem is accessibility to that. I'm sure there's a copy of that in the police files, but typically I only bump into transcripts of interviews like that if there's a court case that is including some of that information in the actual case, and those records then become public. What I'm wondering in Johnny's case is Johnny's no longer alive, so attorney-client privilege is probably in a whole different zone now. Access to those types of records might be a bit different, so keeping my fingers crossed that we might be able to drum up some more information about this that can help us all understand it better. There was other facts that kind of line up even more with comparing this to Brandon Dassey's situation. Barrentine said that he was tired, confused. They wouldn't let him use the restroom. So just more things that, I actually went to a meeting with the attorneys that worked on the Brendan Dassey case, and they were very clear about some of the conditions that happen in false confessions. We're also looking to bring in someone to share some more information with all of you, the audience, about that as well. But let's continue right after this next commercial break. Hey guys, I've got a great idea for a podcast. Check this out. So, everyone loves a spy movie, and you've got a guy running around in a tuxedo and he's skiing down a hill. He gets to a $250,000 sports car and jumps in it with a beautiful blonde woman, and they go peeling off away from the evil base while it explodes in this giant eruption that could be seen half the world away. There is no way that real spy work is like that. And I think someone needs to do a podcast about that. What do you guys think?
I think you're too late, John. The Parcast Network already has a show called Espionage, and it's got it all. Code names, deception, and gadgets.
Yes, and find out the real-world spy tactics required to impersonate and to infiltrate the most confidential places in the world.
That's right. Check out Espionage and check out their episode in particular on Larry Chin. He was China's top spy for over 30 years. Search for and subscribe to Espionage wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also visit parcast.com/espionage to start listening to it right now. Welcome back. We're continuing with the story of Johnny Barrentine. The Dale County District Attorney stated that Johnny didn't come to the police, but the authorities went to him after talking to his wife. Quote, she said he went out July 31st, was gone longer than she expected, and came home looking like he was in a state of shock. He told her a black truck hit him. She said he was so scared, he stayed up all night and watched TV. On the stand at his bond hearing, Johnny would say his wife was lying and he didn't know why. This is one of the most mind-boggling discrepancies that I think we can bump into with this case. Why would his wife be lying about what actually happened that night? Or is he now lying to try to cover up that he actually did have information? Morph, what do you think?
I think an important question is, did the police go looking for Johnny or did Johnny come to them? And, it's reported both ways. But in my mind, why would the police suddenly be interested in Johnny Barrentine and go looking to talk to his wife about Johnny, unless they got a tip or something like that? So it seems a little bit weird that they would just suddenly choose him out of the blue to go talk to his wife. But it's just another one of them rabbit holes we start to go down through with this case.
I'm also wondering about the whole aspect that this is not his first contact with police, that he reached out to them days after this occurrence with the supposed rumor information. And with that information, is that the same tip? Was he trying to tell them at that point, hey, by the way, I was with this guy when he shot there's no way that Spivey would have waved him off if he came into the police station and said that. So I have to assume that Johnny's story that he first presented to Spivey did not include the information that he was actually there. And then later you have him coming in saying, yeah, I was there. And then the story changing time and time again after that. It's just, I don't know how this was found reliable from the get-go. But because of that, I have no idea about the truth of, did they go and talk to Mary after Johnny had initially come in and talked to them? Or was there something else that prompted that? What was the motivating factor for them to kind of look at the case this way, if it wasn't that Johnny came to them saying, hey, I want to collect the reward money and I know who did this and here's the information I have to share with you?
I know one thing in cases, when somebody inserts themselves into a case, that's a red flag to police. When you have somebody who starts really actively looking into cases and they're in the area and they're showing up at different things, police look at them as a potential suspect. That's why they even have like candlelight vigils are intentionally done in a lot of cases to see who shows up to those.
Yeah, and I know in certain instances they'll film funerals to see who shows up for funerals. But in Johnny's case, it goes back to, was he snooping around trying to get his hands on some reward money somehow? And that was his whole point of being involved in discussing it in the first place.
But he did call, right? So if he called the police first, let's say, they're probably curious about him now because he's calling the police. And so that might have been, maybe after that they called his wife and then talked to her. Maybe she didn't like Johnny that much and sort of invented a story around it. I mean, we don't know at this point.
Yeah. It's tough because maybe they figured out how close he was. It seems like there was something that nudged them towards that, or that he had to go and try to talk to them again, which would have been the second time that he's basically approaching the police saying, I have information here. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't have a good way to clear it up unless we are able to get in touch with Mary and just kind of have her speak for herself. But the DA is being very clear at this bond hearing that, this whole story that Johnny came to us, which he might be addressing because it's being brought up as kind of a reason for Johnny doing this, the fact that he was trying to collect the reward money. Maybe that's why the DA's throwing this out and saying, hey, by the way, no, Johnny didn't come to us with this story. We actually found him because we went and talked to Mary and we found out about, this whole discrepancy of where he was that night.
You know what I think any one of us doing what we do, if we live that close to a crime like that, we would be calling around and we would be looking. I mean, literally, I would drive over there. I would have taken pictures. I would investigate it. I mean, I really would, doing what we do if I lived that close. Even if I wasn't into this, but I was just a concerned citizen. He literally lives less than a half a mile from where the car was found.
And also, how many people that just killed 2 girls are going to voluntarily go to the police and get themselves involved?
Yeah. That's a really, really good question, Morph. Well, and I'll put another one to you guys. I know that just in the types of coverage that I've done on my channel, occasionally I get people that they want to insert themselves in that story. We actually had someone kind of like that with this case. Even they're so convinced that they have something to offer. They really are kind of forceful in terms of trying to jam their information at you. That doesn't always mean that those are people that are actually suspects, though. I've seen it enough with my YouTube channel that I know I wouldn't make that immediate conclusion. But I do also know of private investigators, one in particular, who sets up websites about the cases specifically because he wants to track IPs and he wants to see who's coming to review that case on the hunch or thought that he might track down the actual suspect or culprit.
So I think this is also important to note that police, in many cases, hold back little pieces of information that they don't release to the public so they can sort out people coming in that aren't really involved. But if they hear something that is part of what they're holding back, then they become a lot more interested in them. In Johnny's case, since we don't really know everything that was said between them, we don't know how much of the holdback information, if there's any that Johnny might have discussed.
Right. And his attorney's actually saying that even if there is some information like that it could have been given or fed to Johnny through the investigation or through the interview process. That basically, hey, Johnny, you didn't happen to see a pink sweater, did you? All of a sudden he says yes. And they're like, hey, Johnny knew about the pink sweater. No one knows about that. We haven't released that to the media. Let's continue here because we have a very important twist that happens. More than 2 months into the case and a month after Johnny's arrest, a stunning revelation came from the state forensics lab. They found semen on JB's bra and panties. That just threw a totally different twist on it, said Spivey, recounting his reaction to the news. You mean to tell me that 70 days into this, now you're telling me that? For the first time since the autopsy revealed that the girls had not been raped, it appeared that police were probably dealing with a sex crime. Johnny Barrentine's case would ultimately wind up being referred to a grand jury by District Judge Buddy Matthews. Judge Matthews said he made that decision in part because Johnny told a cellmate that he did indeed kill JB and Tracie. I recently spoke to one of Johnny's sisters who told me, my brother wasn't the person they're making him out to be. Johnny was a man with a mental disability. If you knew him, he could never do anything like that. He went through hell. So now we have the DNA pop up. What do you guys think? We have 2 main questions here. Was he involved or was he not involved? A couple of big points that are looking towards his potential involvement. He has this supposed confession, which is now the 7th. Actually, if we count the first tip, this would be the 8th version of this story that's now going in. The jailhouse confession. We have Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testifying that Barrentine was able to describe the girls' clothing. But once again, we don't have the details of this. We don't have the interview to see if that information could have been suggested in some way. On the side of him not being involved, especially now that we know that there was DNA left at the scene, there's no mention in terms of what's at least been released to media of Johnny talking about any type of sexual act that's going on here. To Gray's point, we've got the location kind of wrong in terms of where the shooting's happening. Spivey says Barrentine said the girls were combative, yet in terms of the physical evidence and after talking to Jackie described it as there was hardly, outside of the gunshot wounds, there was hardly anything on them, that it seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of violence that went on except for the fact that they were actually shot. We do know from information that there is one scratch on Tracie's arm, but that's not, to describe that the girls were being combative, they're really trying to fight off these guys that are forcing them into a trunk, I would assume that there might be more wounds than that. And of course, the neighbor actually turned out to have a solid alibi, and he was ruled out from being involved. So Johnny's story that he's given to police, even getting to that final step of saying he knows who the person is, they essentially rule that out as well.
I think it's not very likely that he's involved. I can't say 100% that he's not. The thing is, there's still those unanswered questions about his wife talking about he was gone for 90 minutes. He came back and he was really distraught. I don't think many people get distraught going to buy milk. Okay, so if something happened during that 90 minutes, then there really might be something to it, in that he kept changing his story because he was implicating himself, and then he would change it to try to weave out of that one, because he knew that at one point that he was being is at the center of the investigation. So then he might have started to spin out of it.
But what's weird, Gray, is it doesn't seem like he's spinning out. It seems like he's spinning in as the details come out.
Right, yeah. Like he keeps inserting, well, I was standing there and
I saw this other guy, and I didn't know him, but I gave him a ride. And oh no, well, I was there, and yeah, I knew the guy, and he was my neighbor. And now he's talking to a cellmate. Well, no, it was me. I did it. It just...
Right. It seems like there's a possibility that he did see something, and he wanted to figure out who it was, and that's why he was upset, and that's why he was looking around at surveillance and so forth. But the way he came across the police implicated himself, and then he kept changing it, like you just said, and then he became like he was at the scene, basically, almost like it was a movie filming from afar,
Yeah, which once again sounds almost like a false confession situation. I keep getting stuck on the fact that he went and talked to them way before all this. And if he was really at the scene, I can't imagine that at that point he wouldn't have brought that up. If he was really so motivated to try to help this case. And a few days after, the reward wasn't exactly as substantial as it would be a month after. I think it got up to $25,000 or $30,000 really, really quickly. But a few days after, I think maybe there would have been one announcement of the first 10,000 that got in there or something like that.
Well, how did he think he was going to get the money, though? I mean, if it was all being made up, the thing is when there's a reward given out, that means it leads to an arrest of somebody. So when he's telling all these stories and he's lying, he must know that none of the things that he's saying is going to lead to an arrest.
It almost makes you wonder if perhaps, if we take out the part it was a stranger, it almost makes you wonder if perhaps he recognized the person and didn't want to name them, and thought if he steered them in the right direction, saying it was a stranger, they might find the right person that it actually was, and then he might be able to come back and collect that tip money, that reward money that way. But it's puzzling because, again, for me, the 90 minutes is crucial. If that's true, there's got to be an explanation of where he was during that 90 minutes on something that should have been a 4 or 5 minute round trip. He goes to the store. Oh, they're closed. I got to go back home. No milk tonight. And be back in a couple minutes, not 90 minutes. That's troubling.
Right. But it's still, for me, I struggle because even if there is a 90-minute window that happens there, does that mean that he was necessarily involved in that crime? Could it be that he used that 90 minutes to go visit a girlfriend? Could it be that this wasn't really a trip to go get milk at all, that he was going to score something or something along those lines? There's just so many different possibilities, but the coincidence of that 90 minutes seeming to line up with the time that JB and Tracie are at the actual gas station, it's certainly troubling. It's really hard to let that go. The fact that, and he comes home and according to his wife, he's really upset.
I recently spoke to a sheriff in a cold case that's almost 40 years old, and he readily admitted that early on in the investigation, multiple people lied to the police. And it wasn't because they were involved or wanted to cover it up. It's because they were doing something that they should have been doing and just didn't want to tell the police or their significant others, whether it was having an affair or buying drugs or something along those lines. So there could be other explanations why Johnny might not have told his wife a true story about where he was for 90 minutes.
All right, three men. So I'm going to put it to you guys straight. Do you think Johnny Barrentine was involved with this?
I don't think it's likely, but I think there are some nagging questions that need to be answered.
I think that's fair. Morph?
I have to agree with Gray. There's just a couple things that are nagging at me, and hopefully we can get answers to some of them as we go along. But to believe that he decided to go out randomly for milk, happened to run into Tracie and JB, and said, "Well, I'm out for milk, and I see these two girls, I might as well attack them," and happened to have a gun with them. It just seems, that part almost seems unbelievable. And then we've got all these other little pieces that just don't make a lot of sense, that he saw a stranger that he gave a ride to, and then that guy killed him. So for me, it spins out all over the place, but there's just a couple nagging questions that, specifically, without going into the extra pieces surrounding it, I just have to have answers to come down on one side of the fence, I think.
Yeah, I think I can agree with both you guys. The possibility that he was actually involved is really low. The whole analysis of this part, though, has opened up a lot of really good questions. Once again, I'm really struggling with the thought of the possibility that there was two people involved with this. And it's through this story that it kind of raises new issues with me for that. The black truck is kind of interesting to me because we do keep hearing about a black truck time and time again when you're looking into this case. But I'm also wondering if that is potentially happening because this information was so publicized so early on in this case that now everyone has black truck on their mind. But when it comes down to it, I have to consider this is a man that was challenged, didn't complete the 8th grade. According to what his friends and family say, was known to stretch stories here and there. And it's kind of like the information we're hearing, even from police, is supporting that assessment of him, that he's taking this story and the story's getting bigger and the story's getting bigger. Maybe that is in an effort to prove that he really does deserve the reward money. Maybe he's sitting with police and he's like, "Oh yeah, I saw a black truck." And they're like, "Well, you want us to give you a reward for that?" "No way." "Well, yeah, but then I, gave the guy a ride and we found the two girls." "Oh, really?" "And you're going to, no, we're not going to, you can't get a reward for that." "Oh, well, and I actually saw the guy get out and he went and shot the girl." So there's just this thing that really nags me. I always try to consider a person's intent when I'm looking at cases. And his intent of going after the reward money seems to line up pretty well with the events that are described with his story so far. So that's where I really get stuck with it.
We have another live stream coming up in a few weeks. And if you want to join the conversation with Morph and John and I, find Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube and hit the subscribe button. But then also hit the notification bell and then select the portion that says all notifications. There's actually literally all these levels, because if you don't do it, YouTube will never notify any of your subscribers.
It's so strange to me. When I subscribe to a magazine, that's all I have to do for the magazine to show up. Why doesn't YouTube understand that? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you can also check out video versions of these podcasts at my YouTube channel, LordanArts. And since we're intentionally trying to raise exposure using each of our platforms, remember that you can find all the information and links you need for any specific episode all together in one place over at www.threemeninamystery.com, and that's with the number 3.
If you have information or tips, please visit www.daleso.com. That's DALESO.com, or call the Dale County Sheriff's Office at 334-774-2335. You can also call the Ozark Police Department at 334-774-2644.
To submit an anonymous tip, please call the Dale County Crime Stoppers at 334-774-9999. And you can also contact the Alabama Attorney General's Office Cold Case Unit Tip Line at 866-419-1236, or you can email them at coldcasetips@ago.state.al.us.
We're always going to work hard to present the best info we can, but we're looking for feedback and help getting all these details straight. If you have any corrections or new details for us, please email 3men@3meninamystery.com with the number 3 in both of those, or you can reach out to us on Twitter @3meninamystery or find us on Facebook. Please keep in mind, we're not just looking for rumors on this case. We need to know why the rumor you may believe in is true. That's the information that's going to help us all find the truth and hopefully justice for JB and Tracie.
Are you looking for another true crime podcast to listen to while you're waiting for the next episode of 3 Men and a Mystery? Consider The Trail Went Cold, hosted by Robin Warder. Here's a sample.
Hello everyone, this is Robin Warder, host of the true crime podcast, The Trail Went Cold. If you grew up watching the classic television show Unsolved Mysteries, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I profile a new unsolved murder or missing persons case and share all the baffling details. Afterward, I provide my own personal analysis and theories about what might have happened. This is a show for true crime buffs who are fascinated by cold cases and love to discuss them and pick them apart in an attempt to figure out the truth. So be sure to check out our podcast to learn about some truly bizarre unsolved mysteries where the trail went cold.
Three Men and a Mystery is produced by John Lorden, Mike Morford, and Gray Hughes.
Please rate us on the podcasting platform that you found us on and help us grow by telling your friends and family about us.
We hope you'll join us on the next episode where we find out what the grand jury decides and we talk to an expert to learn more about false confessions and if that's what we're seeing from Johnny Barrentine. I'm John Lorden.
This is Mike Morford.
And I'm Gray Hughes.
And we are 3 Men and a Mystery.